Hi everyone, we've moved on to the Dunwich Legacy for our scenario reviews. So Superfeng and I are here to talk about the first scenario, which is maybe the first, maybe not the first, extracurricular activity. And let's go ahead and jump over to the scenario and talk about what goes on and how many extracurricular activities you might be able to accomplish.
Indeed. Perhaps only one. Um, so as you mentioned before, the first sort of key thing about the scenario is that this may be your first scenario in the campaign, or it may be your second. The first thing that you're prompted to do in the prologue is to say, hey, we want to save Professor Warren Rice, who's at the university, or we want to go save Dr. Francis Morgan. And whether or not you choose one or the other first changes the scenario in several ways. And we are going to go through those changes as well. That's sort of the key first thing that this campaign does pretty coolly.
And it's interesting that they really haven't revisited this idea of kind of a non-linear order until kind of Edge of the Earth and then the Scarlet Keys. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But here it is, the first campaign, and they go for choose which scenario should be your first.
Yeah. All right, yeah, and moving on to the scenario itself. I will say between the two versions of the scenario, whether or not you do it first or second, things are mostly the same. The act deck is pretty much the same. You're going to be going around the university, flipping over these locations and getting some clues that you need to go and spend. And once you've done that, you're going to go look for the janitor, Jazz Mulligan, because a bunch of locations are going to be put into play after you find him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the only one that can get you into these locations. So notably, connected to the student union is the dormitories. The science building has the alchemy labs. And the administration building has the faculty offices. 3 locations that can only be accessed if you have control of Jazz Mulligan.
Mm-hmm. And there's 2 versions of faculty offices. That has to do with which order you play this scenario.
Indeed. So Jazz Mulligan is in the encounter deck. He gets shuffled in along with the encounter discard pile, I believe. Mm-hmm. Correct? Yes. So you're going to be spending actions and clues to discard cards from the encounter deck to try and find him. You also might naturally find him if you draw him during the upkeep phase as well. But once you control him, then sort of all hell breaks loose. You have the experiment, which shows up in the science building, I should say. And you kind of have 3 avenues here. Now that you have control of Jazz, you either can try and kill the experiment to stop him rampaging into the dormitories. You can either go into the dormitories and lead the students to safety, or you can pursue your original goal, which is going to the faculty offices to find Professor Warren Rice. And each of these leads to a different resolution.
Mm-hmm. R1, R2, R3, and maybe there's an R4 if you fail miserably at the entire scenario. But this isn't too tough, right? This is a good opening scenario for choosing which of those 3 might be accomplished by your particular team.
Yep, absolutely. The experiment is a pretty tough enemy. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's very hard to evade it once the enemy phase begins. It readies, so it will attack during the enemy phase. Pretty much, it doesn't have Hunter, but the final agenda will cause it to move every two rounds towards the dormitory. So it does move on its own.
So you have what every 2 rounds, so you have about 6 rounds or so.
Pretty much. Yeah. The only other major difference is that if you are doing this first, you have this second agenda, Dead of Night, which lasts 3 rounds. It basically gives you an extra 3 rounds with a little bit of a downside. However, if you are doing this second, this agenda basically doesn't exist. And after you pass your first agenda, you go straight to the Beast Unleashed.
Mm-hmm. I forgot about
not a lot of time.
I forgot about this maximum hand size being reduced.
Yeah. This it's strangely enough, even though this one is labeled A, I very rarely do this one first.
Yeah, you go with the house always wins first instead?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about maybe like is there a reason to do one versus the other a little bit later, but certainly for this one, the idea that you can jump right to this part means that you have less time to do one of those other tasks while you try to avoid the experiment. But if you're just going to go kill him, then I'm not sure it really matters so much.
Yeah, that's true. That being said, if you do it second, you do have the alchemical concoction, I think that's what it's called,
That's right.
on the alchemy labs, which definitely will help. It deals 7 damage if you can succeed on a book test.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it only does it once though. So that's 7 damage though. That is a lot of damage. That's basically all of its base health. Then you just have the +3 for investigator health remaining.
Yep. Yeah, definitely
Um,
possible.
that being that being said, if you're going here first, going to the alchemy labs is an absolute waste of time. Literally nothing happens here, I believe.
Yeah, 5 shroud,
Um,
no clues, and you don't get to do anything. Yeah.
yeah, because the concoction is only there if you do this one second.
So the map in this particular scenario is kind of notable for a lot of these branching paths that if you go the wrong direction, then you are wasting at least a turn to go back where you were trying to go before. And even
Yes,
the one location that is connected to another location, these two, it has a little wrinkle in that. If you go to the Orin Library, investigating it is a little bit hard because you have to spend another action to investigate. So
absolutely.
there's a lot of I mean, there's some time pressure here, but the map itself kind of leads you to whichever way you go, that's the way you're going to be trying to accomplish your objective. You don't really want to go back and forth.
Yep. The final spoiler of this scenario is that if you do it second, you will get the faculty office's hour is late one, which also does nothing. So if you do it second, you've run out of time. It's too late. He is not here anymore. So at that point, your only solution is either to kill the experiment or to rescue the students.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty simple scenario. I think
Yep.
that's kind of tells the whole story other than the encounter deck itself. So
Yep.
anything else you want to talk about before we talk about those cards?
Now let's do it.
All right. So this is, again, a new box. So we have not only cards from the core set, but also some from the Dunwich Legacy that you're going to see a few more times in this campaign. So part of the purpose of this scenario is to introduce you to one of the main themes of this box, which is discarding cards from your own deck. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of that here.
Yep. So this is the sorcery encounter set. Beyond the Veil is honestly, I really like this card just because it's so iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Because if and when that happens, you take 10 damage. It's a very memorable moment, to be sure.
Yeah, and it seems like this doesn't do anything, and it doesn't. It just says surge, means you pick the next card, but it's just telling you don't don't go through your whole deck. Which, some investigators are gonna try to draw a lot of cards. Some, like Patrice, I think this would be extremely scary to play with. Thankfully,
Yep.
she was not released until quite some time afterwards. But by itself, it doesn't do anything. It's these other cards, like Visions of Futures Past, that will start discarding cards from your deck and get you closer to having your deck be empty.
Yep. Absolutely. It's a pretty gnarly set, but it's a pretty memorable.
Yeah. So that 5 willpower test, you don't, you're not planning on passing that unless you're starting to run into some trouble. Discarding cards on top of your deck, like, what do you think of this mechanic in general? Is this something that you've found to be like okay, you're okay with ignoring it, or have you gotten frustrated seeing a good card just go right into your discard pile?
It really depends, I think. For me at least, it depends on the kind of deck that I'm building. Obviously, there can be some field bad moments where maybe you discard like multiple weapons as a guardian, that those were the weapons that you were planning to use and you couldn't find them in time. But there are some upsides as well. Sometimes this card does not say non-weakness cards, so it can discard weaknesses. That always feels great.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a survivor that relies on recursion, this card can be phenomenal to help put things in your discard pile, like Will Yorick, for example.
Oh yeah, it's like short
But
supply, but the game gave it to you.
exactly. That being said, I think that for very specific kinds of combo decks that rely on one particular card or rely on a suite of cards that if one of them was missing, it kind of feels like the entire engine doesn't work, then this card can feel bad. Mainly because I think that a lot of those decks rely on deck searching and card draw to be able to get their combo off, and this can basically turn it off. So it's kind of those kinds of decks don't really behave well in this kind of campaign. I don't generally play those kinds of decks, so that's just my thing. But I can see why it feels bad. I know that there is also the sentiment of, oh, discarding cards doesn't do anything inherently. Just pretend like those are on the bottom of your deck. But I understand from people who are like, well, I have tutors that in my hand that I want to actually search my deck with, that they're no longer in the deck. Then that can cause it to fail. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And, so I guess we can go back to think about Beyond the Veil. There's three of these. You're likely to get it, but if you get it before you run out of, well, rather, if you run out of cards in your deck before you pick this up, then it's okay. You kind
yeah,
of, maybe your idea is if you're getting close, you want to try to discard your whole deck before you draw Beyond the Veil. So, yeah, I mean, if you reshuffle your deck, you are going to be shuffling in everything that was in your discard pile. So finding those cards is going to take the same amount of work as if they were in your deck to begin with. You just have to wait that whole extra shuffle. So, yeah, I totally agree that depending on your style of play, it's not as if those cards were at the bottom of your deck. It's kind of like you're waiting an extra round or extra
yeah,
deck shuffle to get them again.
right.
Okay, we have some more cards that combo with this. Arcane Barrier. This one gives you a choice. You can discard the top 5 cards of your deck if you fail this test, or you can just not move.
Yeah. So this card is interesting because I very much like the design of this card. One, because obviously the cancel the move is not forced. You don't have to do it. You can just take the penance of discarding the top 5 cards of your deck, which becomes an interesting choice if you have a Beyond the Veil on you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for most people, at least me personally, if I don't have Beyond the Veil on me, I will always choose to discard 5 cards if I'm not passing this test. Because I think that the move is much more important than those 5 cards that I would have lost.
Yeah, this is a scenario where you can end it before that ticking time bomb Beyond the Veil goes off. So you want to try to do that. And any action that you just waste is probably not a great idea. But it's also kind of worth
Yeah.
saying here, it's a tough test. This is 4 willpower,
Hmm.
and anyone except for maybe the 5 willpower mystics are not looking to pass this, which is the same with the Visions of Futures Past. So, yet again, a test that you're not really meant to pass.
Yes. That being said, obviously, if you have the ability to pass this with, for example, as you said, a mystic or someone who has skill cards that could contribute to it, like have that person go first and see if they pass it so that it discards for everyone else.
That's
It's
right.
something that they can contribute.
Yeah, it doesn't stick around forever if you can pass the test. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, we have Terror from Beyond.
I love this card. I love this card so much. It's one of my favorite peril cards for sure. It's always just a fun game to be like, oh, what do people have more of? Assets, events, or skills in their hands? Or it even leads to thoughts of like, I'm playing, or my partner is playing Stella. Do I think that they have neither rain nor snows in their hand that they're willing to discard for this? Um, I don't know why, but I love this card because it just leads to a lot of really interesting decisions.
It does, and it also makes players pay attention to what everyone else is playing. Like,
Yeah.
if you're on a team with Nathaniel Cho, like don't pick event. That's
Don't pick a pen.
you know. So if someone's sleeping while they're playing, you might not want them to pick up this card. But I agree, it's a
Yeah,
fun one. It
it's
can
fun.
really tear apart your hand though. So
It can.
I don't think you can really counterplay this. I don't think there's anything you can do about oh, I should just have 2 of each or something in my hand at all times to not get totally wrecked. Uh,
Yeah. I think that generally going skill is usually the best play, unless you're like someone like Amanda or something that has like your entire hand is skills.
mhm.
But skills are generally the least impactful for the card cost that they have.
That's right. So yeah, it's worth saying in case you're not aware, you can pick something that no one ends up having in their hand.
Right.
This isn't um, a case where you must change the game state, but that's also why the second part here says if that someone else has already drawn this, you have to choose 2 card types because you could choose the thing that already caused everyone else to discard all of their events, for example. Now you can choose event and skill.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Push to the beyond.
Pushed. This card, for some reason, I've gotten this card to actually discard that asset more often than not. I don't know why. It's kind of weird. This card is pretty tough, I would say. It's like a crypt chill in the sense that you're losing a story asset that a non-story asset that you played, and it also is discarding itself. So in its worst case, it is an auto-failed crypt chill, and also you take 2 horror. In its best case, it's like, oh, I played a weapon, it has no ammo. I'll shuffle that back into my deck. It didn't get discarded. It's kind of like I reloaded the weapon. So this card it's like Crypt Chill, but it's much more swingy, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you say, if you're looking for things to go into your discard pile, Crypt Chill is actually kind of better. This, you might get the thing into your discard pile, you might not. You'll get something else, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no test here, so as you say.
There's no test. It's the testless 2 horror, which can be pretty bad. I've had that actually kill me once.
All right, next set. This is, I don't remember the name of this one.
This one is Bishop's Thralls.
Bishop's Thralls. Okay.
Funnily enough.
Which is weird because there's some other thralls in this box, but not in this set here.
Right.
Okay, we've got the world's easiest victory point enemy.
Yes, I would say. Okay, to be fair, that 4 fight is not nothing. 4 fight is not nothing. It's the fact that it only has 3 health.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, I think that at level 0, okay, if you're doing this scenario first and or second, this guy can be a little bit difficult to deal with. Yes, it would probably just require you to shoot a gun and commit a vicious blow potentially. But the 4 fight's not nothing at level 0 specifically. But especially, I think that this guy shows up later on as well, and he's just a cakewalk at that point.
Yeah, I'm thinking of other cards that are kind of in this vein, like the Serpent from Yoth from the Forgotten Age, which has 5 health. The 3 here is just 1 Spectral Razor or something, and you're good to go. But yeah, I think they corrected on that one in future campaigns. And these guys, Thralls, also super easy. They do have the interesting spawn instructions, so they do go somewhere that has clues, which might be where your clue getter is. But notably, since it has a spawn instruction, it can spawn with whoever happens to be at that location. You don't have to make it go to whoever drew it.
Yeah, Thrall's pretty nice and simple. For some reason, I always find them satisfying to defeat. Maybe because having 2 fight and or 2 evade is you're gonna pass that test, and having 2 health means that you're gonna use a gun for it. So it always feels like you're being the most efficient when shooting the Thrall. I don't know why. It just feels good.
Nah, you're right. Okay, and then there's Light of a Forgamon, and this card can go die in a fire for all I could for all I care.
Poor Daniela.
Oh no, it's awful.
It's tough for sure. I think that so I think that there are some scenarios where this card does nothing personally, but there are some scenarios where this absolutely wrecks you.
Well, this one, tough. Right? Like, so the last agenda here, you don't actually advance it ever. You just remove the doom. So if you happen to attach Light of Forgamon to the agenda or the act, which at that point probably won't matter, it's there till the end of the game.
Yeah. It's pretty bad, especially if you have someone like you're relying on Pete Cleaver to be able to deal your damage, and you're like, oh, I can no longer heal Peter's horror anymore, so that's a problem. Yeah, it's tough. I do think there is some play with it where you like attach it to the act because you're about to advance, or you attach it to the agenda because it's the witching hour or something like that. There is some like play there, but I agree, especially when it's the worst near the end of the scenario where you're either on the last agenda or the last act where advancing it the game is over anyway. This card could be pretty rough.
Yeah, and it's peril, so I get why you're supposed to make the choice that is on your own, but that just also means no one else can play a word protection or a test of will or something else to try to get rid of it for you. So if you're looking to cancel this card, it has to be drawn by exactly the right person.
Yep.
I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the one that's in Carcosa or Return to Carcosa. It's kind of like it too.
Oh, it's Sign of Hester.
Yeah. Okay. On the other hand, I like the Whippoorwill set. That's a good one.
Whippoorwills are really cool. I love the Whippoorwill as an enemy. It's your class. It's the classic aloof enemy that you don't feel like killing right now because you need to waste an action to engage it. But once you get like one or even two at your location, you're like, oh, I really wish this Whippoorwill wasn't here right now. um, it's a very well designed enemy, I think.
It really is. And there's good ways to deal with it. If you are in Guardian, you can use a Beat Cup, you can use
Yep.
some other stuff to.
If you're Agnes, you can use your ability.
Yep. So it's good, but I agree with you. The best part is just that you say, I'll just run away from it, and it does come after you. It's still a hunter, and you can try to stay ahead of it. But the moment you get two, or maybe even the third one, you're gonna say, well, that wasn't a good idea. I should have taken actions earlier to get rid of it.
Yes. Hey, that's what a dynamite's for.
Oh man, dynamites get rid of a tree full of birds real quickly.
Absolutely.
All right, and eager for death. I'm not sure it actually matches with the whippoorwills that much, but
No, I believe it's because the art is Whippoorwills in it.
yeah, I think it's a good
Yeah.
card. I like the idea here, and they did come back to this with I think in the Circle Undone with a kind of
Correct.
the mirror of this one, which is increasing the difficulty for each horror on you. If you fail, you take damage, and it kind of has a nice spiraling effect with this card.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's pretty standard. I would say that this is kind of the equivalent of the Rotting Remains in this campaign. That being said, there is no Grasping Hands in this campaign, so it kind of just stands alone.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the one that deals you horror.
Yep. Okay, and then we've got some classics from the core set. Ancient Evils,
Yep.
it just speeds up the scenario a little bit. Not much more
Yep.
to say. Locked Door slows you down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know why these guys, the Yithian observers, are in this scenario.
Because they're servants of Yogg-Sothoth, I guess.
I guess, like, does no
I
one
guess so.
notice there's this, like, I don't know.
Yeah, he's the librarian at the university secretly.
That makes some sense.
Yeah.
But I don't really think that their ability or the offer power really syncs with the overall encounter set either, right? It's more about discarding cards from your hand rather than the deck.
Yeah, I think that kind of I can see a thematic resonance specifically with Offer of Power because it's about knowledge, and that's that's Yogg-Sothoth's whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in a university, so there.
Well, it's 2 more victory points to pick up, so there is a
It is.
healthy amount in this first scenario, which Dunwich is not known for otherwise.
Yeah.
All right, I guess that's kind of it for the encounter set. I think we should talk about the scenario reference card though, because when I mentioned earlier about there being some tough tests in the encounter deck, the Locked Door actually adds to that too. The skull really makes that even harder, I think. Right? So if you fail, which you're probably going to on those tests, then you're continuing your spiral of discarding cards. So you get a -1 on for the skull for Visions of Future Past. Well, maybe you're actually discarding not only 3, but whatever you failed by on on that test itself.
Yeah, I never really thought about that because I always found the skulls. That's to -1. It's not so bad. But yeah, against tests that you're kind of quote unquote expected to fail, for example, Visions of Futures Past, as you talked about, then it's a whole wombo combo. It's like you're not expected to fail this, and also we're gonna punish you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
The cultist honestly isn't that bad either. Yes, it will probably become a -3 by the end of the scenario, but hopefully you should be able to get around that.
It's kind of funny because usually the skull is like the effects from the cultist, right? It gets harder when the scenario is closer to being over.
Honestly, I think that if this was designed today, they would just be swapped.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing here is that there's an Elder Thing in the Chaos bag, but you may know on standard in this campaign, you do not start with an Elder Thing in the bag. This Elder Thing is gotten if you had done the House Always Wins first, and if you had failed to that one is you cheat. That's right, and we'll get to that later on.
Yeah.
But this Elder Thing actually, because if you're doing this 1 second, this Elder Thing can be very bad. I found. I think the worst I've seen this is that it's gotten to like a -6 for me, which is pretty tough. But the basically the worry for me is this token is unbounded. There's no limit to this, and so you might be like, I will discard Leo DeLuca and my lockpicks, and now it's a -9. Ooh.
How about 2 copies of extensive research?
Exactly. Oh, that's awesome.
Minus
Uh,
24.
yeah. If only the if only your skilled value could go below 0, and then you can do Rabbit's Foot level 3. That would be amazing.
That's so funny.
Um, yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, that token's pretty tough, but it should be. You made a bad decision in the other scenario. So
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll talk about overall thoughts when we look at the ratings, because I have some
yep.
more, ideas about the whole how this one goes too, and I'm sure you do. So let's jump over to that. Okay, so replayability. If you haven't seen these rankings before, we talked about this in a previous video. We've got 4 different categories with a few leading questions here that we'll talk about, and then we'll make we'll place our little logos on this scale from 1 to 5. So
Yeah.
replayability is first, and I think we have to mention the fact that it could be played in either order, but
Yes.
also the fact that there's 3 different paths to take, even though the saving Professor Warren Rice is not really an option if you play the second.
Yeah. I would say that for me, the replayability in this one comes from the 3 different paths, and it comes from the fact that there are two versions of the scenario. That being said, the 2 versions of the scenario don't change the scenario that much. It adds the fact that there's an alchemical concoction, and it basically just removes one of the agendas. That really doesn't change a lot to the scenario itself. And in fact, it actually removes one of the resolutions that you could get. That one is honestly a pretty big downside for the scenario replayability wise. That being said, I do like the fact that there are multiple venues for the resolutions of the scenario, and each of the 3 resolutions actually does affect it. It puts something in your campaign log later on, so I really do like that. I think that I would probably give it a 2.5 for replayability. There is some in there, but ultimately it's going to play out the same each time.
Let me ask you before I give my thoughts. So, what do you think of the idea that they do cut off some avenues if you play this in a different order? Like on one hand, coming from like a video game perspective where you have side quests with infinite time to complete them, you're as a gamer sometimes you're encouraged to, I want to do everything in the game, right? I bought the game, I want to be able to do as much as I possibly can. On the other hand, there is something thematic about you came to this one, came to the university too late, so Professor Warren Rice is no longer there, so it helps tell the story. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you wish you could do
Yeah,
everything?
so I agree with you in the sense that I think that the story that it tells by not allowing you to rescue Professor Warren Rice if you do it second is really cool. However, I think that the way that the scenario uses that story could have been better. Mainly because I think that the House Always Wins does it way better. Yes, Dr. Francis Morgan is gone, but now you have an entirely different person you can save, and that leads on to consequences further down in the campaign as well. In this scenario, it's just the path has been closed for you. It didn't provide anything new, rather, it just removed something.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it quite that way. So I agree. They didn't make it as if you had something, an alternative, right? It's
Yeah.
just still those 3 different pathways, which I suppose, or the other 2 pathways, which I suppose in the House Always Wins, which we will talk about, there isn't that other option, right? There's just kind of a replacement act. So I guess they tried 2 different things, but I agree that for fun, I wish they had given you something else to do. And I tend to try to do the same thing every time, depending on how the game is going. If I'm playing this one first or second, I'm usually going to try to kill the monster, and if not, I'll just go get the save the students, because I find those to
Yeah.
be, the most important, but also the saving the students is relatively easy. So how different is each playthrough? I don't know. Like I wish it were a little bit more different. that said, like my first time playing it, I felt like this was really cool. Like, oh wow, I get to decide which of these things feels like the most fun. So actually, I'm going to give this like a 4. I think,
Mm.
or let's see, where's 4? Yeah, this is 4. No, 4 is here. Have we decided how this works again?
I think both of us need to be one half mark to the left.
Okay, thank you. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Mostly because this is a scenario, it's not just about the replayability in those different acts, which I really appreciate, but this is a pretty big encounter deck. I think that has a lot to do with how the game goes, and it's just kind of classic go around and get clues, which I find to be really actually fun. And when I play this with newer players, this tends to be the first one or second one that we play, and being able to use your deck as the way that it's intended to play, regardless of the discard stuff, is fun and it's relatively easy. So sometimes it's nice to have like a romp through a scenario, and then all of a sudden the monster shows up and you switch your tactics a little bit. But I think it's whenever I've replayed this, it's been a good time. So I've found that there's always something to enjoy that I haven't seen before or haven't experienced in quite the same way, especially giving someone else the choice of which of the tasks would you like to complete.
Yeah, fair enough.
Speaking of fair, let's talk about the next part, which is fairness. And again, we're asking, are there ways to deal with, the randomness that might be in the scenario? Is it, fair in terms of having some play here? And notably, it's the when do you discard or get Jazz Mulligan, right?
Yeah.
That's mostly what is going to be determining the randomness of how the scenario plays out.
I swear to God, Jazz does not like me. Multiple times that I've played this scenario, he has been the last card in the encounter deck so often that it's become a bit of a meme. Um, yeah, I think it's pretty tough. You were talking about that this encounter deck is fairly large, and having that amount of variance for when you find Jazz Mulligan can lead to wildly different outcomes when it comes to the scenario and the agenda and how far along you are when you finally get to the interesting point of doing the things. Um, so I think in that sense, and there's really no okay. I mean, you could play Gloria Goldberg and just try and find him yourself. And also, obviously, you can spend clues to be able to look for him. But I think that there is not a lot of ways to mitigate the fact that Jazz could just be on the bottom of the encounter deck, and that seems a little bit rough to me.
Mm-hmm. How does it play out with 4 players?
So yeah, in 4 players, I think that more often than not, you are spending more clues because there are more clues. All of the clues are based on per player things, and you're also drawing more encounter cards. So you're going through the deck a lot faster. I think that this is something that maybe not a lot of people realize when you are looking for Jazz, because the action to spend one clue cuts away a certain amount of cards from the deck unless you're playing true solo.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of clues that you have and the amount of actions that you have doesn't or sorry, I should say the amount of clues you have and the amount of actions you have grow with the player count, but the amount of cards that you need to go through don't, right? That is a little bit mitigated in true solo where discarding a card discards 10, sorry, spending a clue discards 10 cards.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that specifically in 2 player, you can spend like up to 5 or 6 rounds spending actions and spending clues, and you won't see him yet. Just because you don't have the actions or clues to actually spend to see him yet. So there's a weird sort of valley of inconvenience when it comes from 1 player to 2 players. But at 4 players, it can go by really quickly.
Yeah, I feel like they should have scaled it per player, not just between 1 player and more than 1 player. I feel like if it was discard, I don't know, 4 or something at a higher player count, and then it was 6 and then 8 and then 10, depending on how many investigators are in the game, I think made it easier. Or maybe something else where you keep track of how many times you've taken that action, and then the more times you've done it, the more you discard think there's some small things that they could have done,
Yeah, that's interesting.
but they do have something, right? They knew that you weren't just going to naturally discard him from the encounter deck. So you're supposed to, you have a way to mitigate that sort of randomness, but perhaps not enough.
Yeah, I think it's tough because you have to take the actions to spend the clues. So it's kind of like you're taking two actions to get them because you need to get an action to get clues to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be a little rough as well if you're like uh, don't have the amount of actions that you think you need to actually find him.
Yeah, and like we said, there's some action tax in this scenario, not just investigating the Orton Library, but also moving around, having an arcane barrier, having a locked door. So it's not nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, where are you gonna land?
Okay. So ultimately, I think that is the it's not a minor complaint, I should say, but it's not huge. It's not like it's the entire scenario. Um, I I think that the scenario does give you tools to succeed. I mean, like once you have Jazz, it's pretty fair to just like go places and spend clues. That being said, the Jazz thing, it's a little rough. I think I'm gonna give it in the middle. I'm gonna go for a 3 for now. Um, it's like the Jazz thing does upset me, but everything else is fine.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that bothers me, and then the Light of Forgamon card. That's about it. All right, let's go to the next one, which is balance. Does this basically unfairly punish any investigators, or uh, is it pretty much reasonable that anyone can participate?
I'm a little upset that the experiment readies at the start of the enemy phase. Um,
I guess we have
Mostly
a
because I
quick getaway now that could help.
That's true. That's true. It's just it kind of feels bad for someone like Wendy or someone who was trying to evade, like who was gonna provide, opportunity to actually evade the big bad. That being said, maybe that means that it is balanced because otherwise the evade person would be like, "We need you," otherwise we're just gonna die. Um, I think that it could. There's some interesting things they could have taken with the experiment to, you know, make it more balanced. I think it does kind of punish evading characters in my opinion. Um, but that's just I think that ultimately at this stage of the game, evading was a kind of a different tool than it is right now,
Mhm.
and so it kind of feels a little off. So I don't really know how to put that into perspective. I don't. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, at least you can evade, and because it's massive, right? So you can evade
Yeah.
for the investigation phase and help everyone play their assets down, and that's fine. Like, yeah, it kind of sucks to have to then get attacked by this thing for the entire enemy phase, but I think it's also there to try to keep you from camping out on its location for too long.
That's true. Um, I think what's rough is it could have had text of yes, it readies, but maybe something to do with attacks of opportunity,
Yeah.
where like it's rampaging in the room, so it doesn't really think about you until it becomes the enemy phase. So you can at least like get away from it, or I don't know, maybe there's a test on it when you leave and it attacks you if you fail. I don't know. That'd be a lot of text, I think. So
Hmm.
maybe not. But
Early
it's
early
rough
Arkham.
because exactly. I think it's rough because it kind of lays into the thing where it's like, oh yeah, we kind of need to evade it because if it comes to us, then it's a big problem trying to leave the location. But also, if we evade it, it doesn't really help if unless everyone leaves at the same time. So it's a little weird.
Hmm. The only other thing in this one that is maybe rough on your particular investigator group is the intellect test that you have to take to pick up the alchemical concoction.
And also Jazz, I believe, right?
Oh, you have to parlay with him, right? Or no?
Correct. You parlay and test 3 book. Um,
That's right.
So that does require an intellect test.
Mm.
So poor mystics. Um, I would hope that you'd be able to like pass something like that. But it is pretty bad if you can't do that.
I think with the alchemical concoction, though, you have to do it twice, right? You have to pick it up by passing a 5 intellect test.
Yeah,
Eh,
you have to investigate the alchemy labs
mhm.
uh,
And
as an
then
action.
the alchemical concoction itself has to use intellect. So
Yeah,
you're not doing this unless you have 4 or 5 in that stat, or a lot of skill cards that are uh, saved up for that.
Yeah, definitely a lot of intellect tests.
Otherwise, I mean, we're
Um,
going to see that again later in this campaign of having
yeah.
an investigate on a particular scenario card. But mm, it's okay here, right? Because you don't have to do it. You have another option.
Yeah, exactly. I think that ultimately it's like, oh yeah, if you can't do that option, then you have the ability to go to the dormitories. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. All right. Where are
And
you?
also, if you're a willpower mystic, then you do a lot of these other tests really easily, like the science building. You don't want to fail there, etc. There's a lot of willpower tests in the counter deck. So
That's true. There is some uh, equal opportunity
yeah.
difficult tests based on your stats. So yeah. All right. Where are you going to
Anyway,
land for balance?
yeah, I think that the experiment having weird evading things is like a little bit of a thing, but ultimately this is the scenario where you get clues and you kill enemies, so that's pretty balanced all across the board. If you can do that, you can win the scenario. So I'll probably give it a 4, I think.
Yeah, me too. 4 is fine. I mean, it's pretty good. Like honestly, it doesn't ask too much
Yep.
of your team in particular.
Yep.
All right, last one that we have is the experience.
All right. Yeah, this one is interesting. I do think that the one cool thing about the scenario is the multiple routes to the resolution. You have 3 different routes and or 2 different routes. Um I honestly I don't really feel the theme of this scenario very much. The fact that you're in a university and you're going into different rooms and stuff. The I don't know why, but the locations that are all have to do with, the science building. If you fail a willpower test at the science building, you take a horror. Administration building, every time you earn your turn there, you discard the top card of your deck. I see what they're trying to go for with a lot of them discarding cards in your deck because I don't know, you're in like a university and therefore you're kind of forgetting things because either the buildings are large or there's like too many things going on, or just going this feeling of being in a university, being like, oh, I'm in a class or whatever.
Mhm.
um I don't really find that to be very strong in this scenario. Like honestly, I think that if this, like, to me, this scenario didn't have to be in a university, and it would basically play it out the same way, except for the fact of the whole experiment coming to kill the students in the dormitories. I think that is a cool part of it.
That actually is what sticks out to me. I actually work at a university, so I can agree that most of this could be anywhere except for the whole science building and the dormitories. So
Yeah.
it feels like it's rampaging across campus, and you have to go stop it in time. And that part, like I said, it stuck with me. I think that is great. I feel like you're going to save um, the students from this horrible monster. I don't know what it's doing there exactly. It's not particularly cleared up later in the campaign, but whatever. And then even just like going through the offices to look for Professor Warren Rice is also kind of cool.
Yeah.
I find that is there a new and interesting gameplay loop? Not until you get to that last part, and then it's like it's kicking the scenario up into another gear, which I've always found to be really fun.
Yeah, that's true. So I think for myself, I'm gonna give it a 3. I'll give it marks on the experiment and the dormitories, but I think for me the rest of the theme is a little bit lacking, which is why it's a 3.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a higher mark for that. I'm going with a 4 maybe. It's doing a good job, and I've found that the loop itself is fun. I always feel like I have something to do, and I don't know, there's even if you have some extra time for some reason, you can go grab victory points from the locations that you're not intending to uh, actually uh, use the objective on. So
That is true.
yeah, it's a good scenario to me anyway. It's one of the first ones, and I do give it some extra points here for it being it's the first one that's really trying something. I don't want to say different because the beginning part is pretty straightforward, but
Hmm.
then when you flip the act and you're now doing something or the agenda really when the experiment shows up, you start to have to use your cards in a different way and think about what you really have time for. And the pressure that Ancient Evils gives is makes it even better.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's about it for this portion. We will now talk a little bit about the return to. Okay, let's look at the return to, which mostly is the encounter sets, but there's one new location. So you
Correct.
you
I
might
believe that. one of these is randomly chosen,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little weird because it's one of the few times where they don't do the randomization correctly, where it's like the back sides are both different, so
Oh
you
yeah.
can't really randomize them.
So you'll know.
You'll know. But yeah, this one is a little different. After you discover one more clues, discard 3 cards from type of deck for each clue you just discovered. It's just a different version of this. Obviously, this one has to do with like more, taking more actions, but
Mhm.
it's just variety. That's all it is.
Yeah. Okay.
I swear that they were designing the encounter pack or the what is it called? The Mythos pack. They're like, we have one more card we can put in this. Let's just do this.
All right. The rest of it is quite different, though. So I mean, this isn't the entire encounter deck, but these are all the new ones. We'll
Yep.
start with this enemy. There's one of them that already starts in play.
Correct.
I
Where do they
don't.
start and play actually? Oh, if
It,
you've already completed the return to house always wins, you spawn them in the administration building.
okay.
Here.
So it might already be out there, and they do have Hunter, so you can't just sit on your initial location for first turn.
Yeah, and it plays into the theme as well. After it attacks you, discard cards in your deck. It does have this thing where if it's evaded, it's defeated. That's nice.
Tough test, though.
So yeah, it's a pretty tough test. That being said, against 3 health, that like could be pretty efficient in terms of actions.
Absolutely. So this is a addition, right? It's not replacing anything from the original.
Correct.
All right. Okay, so we have some replacements for this is for locked door.
No, these 3 are for the Beyond.
Ah,
The ones that have the Arcane Barrier,
Arcane Barrier.
the this one is the thing that I can't remember what it's called.
Terror from
Um,
Beyond.
yes, that's right. And then this one is the one that shuffles into your deck.
That's
I
right.
also can't remember what it's called.
Ooh, these
Um,
are tough.
these ones are tough. Yeah, Infinite Doorway is tough. You cannot. I believe that there's no way to get rid of this. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, there's no way to get rid of it anymore. It's just it happens. You discard the top card of your deck. It also has the thing where if it's a weakness, you draw it, no longer discarding weaknesses, so that's tough. Um, and it has this thing where for every copy in your hand or player, you must either take a horror or discard that card. So it can cascade into pretty bad things. It's pretty tough. This is the card that you're like, if someone draws this at the Miskatonic Quad where people are moving back and forth,
Oh God.
like you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Baleful Welcome. I think this one's kind of okay. So you're choosing 2 things not to do. I suppose I've only played this in 2 or 3 players, so it hasn't really bothered me that much.
Yeah.
But usually you can see what's on the board and decide what makes sense. Usually evade is not something you're going to do.
Exactly. You can pretty much determine which ones you're not doing. Evade is, as you said, evade is usually a good choice. I think that's what is it? In 4-player, this can either be totally fine because if you draw this as the 4th player, then you're like, I know exactly what's going on. If you draw this as the lead investigator in player order, and you draw this, you're like, this could be bad because if someone else draws an enemy and I choose fight, then that's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think that the second choice is pretty rough. After evade, you're like, I guess play so everyone basically has a different dissonant voice, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like about right.
Yeah, that is tough. But it is just 1 round.
Yeah.
You can do other things. You could, yeah, you're right. The enemies are kind of the tough ones because they demand your attention now.
Yeah.
Haunting Recollections. This feels like this is a double whammy with the Infinite Doorway.
Yeah, absolutely. This card feels like it could be in Return to the Forgotten Age. Just joking. For each card in your hand, if there's a copy of the card in your discard pile, take a horde and max 3. Interesting. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, and there's no way that they
Test
let you get away with a gimme, right? So if you don't take any horror, well, discard cards.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's not a test. Wow.
Secret Door. This one is the replacement for Locked Door, and it's weird, right? Like they changed the test entirely, so it's now willpower and intellect.
Yeah, they do bump it down. It's willpower or intellect 3, so that's generally more passable. That being said, like it's pretty tough. It also is a little weird that you cannot leave. So that means that someone could enter and then take the test to discard it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, yeah, it attaches the location with the most investigators, so it's going to have maximum impact. Unless you're spread out, maybe this won't have a big deal. You could put it on your mystic or your seeker.
Yeah,
Um,
but it doesn't deal with the clues anymore, so it's an interesting
correct.
replacement, but it feels like just a different card entirely.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, worth talking about Resurgent Evils. This is the Ancient
Yeah.
Evils replacement, so no longer do you just place one Doom in the current agenda, and that could cause it to advance, but you get a choice. Would you like that, or would you like the top two cards of the encounter deck? But only you can make that decision, and no one else can ward this for you either.
Yeah. I really like this card because it turns Ancient Evils into an interesting choice. Um, it's also very akin to that Forgotten Age card that you either get poisoned or you draw its top two encounter deck, which is funny because that one is like, I don't know. I never choose poison for that one.
Me neither.
And for this card, I actually don't think I ever choose Doom. Maybe unless it's like the end of the scenario and you know you're about to win.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think that two cards is honestly worth Doom in a lot of circumstances, especially in this scenario that the Doom clock is so short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. This is a great card. I think a lot of people use this as a replacement for Ancient Evils in other campaigns, even.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's a well balanced card.
Yeah. Okay, and then we have a replacement for the Agents of Yog Sothoth, I think.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
And we have another victory point enemy that is pretty similar.
Yes, pretty much. It has less fight and evade, but it has an effect that is happens at the end of the enemy phase regardless.
Yeah, just don't let him don't let him live that long.
Yeah, I find this guy to be pretty okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not so bad. Like I said, the other set didn't really play into the theme as much because you're discarding cards from your hand. This makes much more sense.
Yeah, this card's weird. You may draw a card. You may choose and discard up to two cards in your hand. Test Willpower X. If you fail, take two horror. X is equal to the number of cards in your hand when this test begins. So, what does this card do?
So you get to
Okay, right.
choose what what the difficulty of the test is, basically.
Right. So, okay, yeah, I like this card. I remember why I like this card because it's like Offer of Power, but instead of it being cards and Doom or horror, it's like you kind of make the choice also in this card because you're like, oh, I could draw a card and just fail the test because I just want to keep the cards, or I can be like, I will discard the cards to see if I can pass the test and not take the horror. So I think that there's actually some interesting things going on here where it's kind of like it's providing the theme of Offer of Power, but in a much more interesting way.
I agree, and it also maybe very slightly can add things to your discard pile, which matters for the one of those tokens, the cultist token.
Yeah.
Don't think it matters that much, but it does fit, I think, better with the whole set.
You do choose the cards.
Mm-hmm.
So you could put your wingets in your discard pile, I guess.
Yep.
Just for funsies.
That's right. All right, so
You could put your moonstones in and play them. That'd be fun.
And then it helps out your test. That's so funny.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, I think that is about it. The Return to, I haven't played this more than a few times, so I can't remember how different it really ends up being, but it's a nice, for variety set. It doesn't really change how the scenario goes at all.
Yeah, this one pretty much stays very similar.
Okay, well, we have done it. We have talked about the first scenario, or maybe the second scenario of the Dunwich Legacy. Next time, we will move on to The House Always Wins. Thank you for watching. If you haven't checked out Superfeng's channel, please go do that. You'll see some cool stuff, some really good playthroughs, some unboxing. There will be some Circle Undone unboxing very soon, I think.
I would hope so. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. See you next one.